Hey everyone, just a few quick things before we get started. Don't forget to sign the attendance sheet. It's just real simple. Just ask you 2 questions. Kind of looks like this. But that's pretty much it. Please enjoy. Hope you all learned something.
Okay, hello everybody. So today we're going to be going over just some of the basics of C++. My office hours are up here. If you have any questions, feel free to pop by in the Zoom or message me in Discord or just shoot me an email. Okay? Well, one of the first things we're going to go over is what should you always have in a program? So if you go top to bottom, the first thing you should have is your # include IO string. The next thing would be using namespace. After that, we got its main, and we also always need semicolons. And last but not least, comments. Also, sorry, this should be using namespace std. Okay. So these are kind of just the basic things you need to have in a program. And in this worksheet, we're going to be going into a little more detail on some of them. For instance, the next question is, what are libraries and how do we use them? Well, you may not know this, but an example of a library is IOString. And so we use them by doing #include IOString. And of course there's going to be different names for some of them, as you'll see later on, but these are pretty important for using stuff. For example, they are include like already coded stuff that just makes C++ easier to use. So basically they just allow you to do, they make things easier with like shortcuts. Right? Like for example in IOStream, it allows us to use cout like you used earlier, which I'll go into in a later video, but it just allows you to use cout to easily output stuff, so it just makes coding a little easier. Okay, so the next question is, what is using namespace std for? So this is always going to go right under your includes. This also is mostly just for making coding easier. For example, it allows us to use cout by just typing cout and inline. If you didn't have these, every time you'd have to type std : cout. That'd be every time you want to use that. So this using namespace std just allows you to just quickly type cout and then whatever you want to output. Just makes things easier. Okay, next question is, how does main work? So obviously in every C++ program we have to have a main. So essentially this main is a main function, and so whenever you write main, you're always going to want to give it int main and open and close parentheses, as well as 2 brackets. And so main's going to work by, when you compile it line by line, it'll read your code, but it's only when it starts to get to main does it actually run anything. For example, if outside of main you were to try to cout 2 + 2, it wouldn't work because it's not in main. So nothing will run unless it came from main. So like in main, this is where you'd want to type all your code. And you may have seen at the bottom of main, there's a return 0. So that's not going to output 0, it just ends the program, okay? So let's say you have code up here, and you have a return 0, and then you have another piece of code trying to print something out, okay? So once it hits this return 0, it's not going to go past it, and it's only going to run this part of your code and not this part. So that part would never get run. Okay. And so the next question is how to use brackets. And so you can see I use brackets up here, which is kind of a hint for us. So you want to put brackets around your code, essentially. There will be more places to use brackets later, but for now, you just want to put it, you just want to use the brackets with main. And so it's very important that there's no code outside your brackets. For example, if you went up here and we were to type something below, like cout 2, this wouldn't get run because it's outside of main. So brackets just kind of define where specific things are. So for example here, these brackets say, hey, main starts right here and it ends right here. So anything outside of it won't get run. So we can also probably do that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to type this as well. Brackets define where code belongs. Alright, semicolons. So when do we use semicolons? Semicolons are used, well, first off, semicolons are used to end a line. So going back up to this code up here, you see a semicolon here that says, hey, this line is over. I also put a semicolon here. I did not put any semicolons here because it wasn't actually any code. So semicolons is basically used to end a line. So whenever you're done with a line, you need to finish it with a semicolon. And so essentially you use semicolons everywhere except for a few specific places. So we're going to put semicolons belong after each line except for. And so if we go back here, you can see I did not put a semicolon after this right here. So you never really want to put a semicolon next to an open bracket. Okay, so after an open bracket, and then we'll just do like example its main. So like you never want to put a semicolon after this. Or if you choose to start your main even like this, its main, you also would not put a semicolon right there. So you also would not put a semicolon after a parentheses. You also do not want a semicolon. And for the most part, you also don't want a semicolon after a closing bracket. There are one or two exceptions to this rule, this last rule down here, but we won't get to that till later in the semester. So for right now, these are when you don't put semicolons after any kind of brackets or parentheses. And so you also don't want to put one after an include statement. So like this, like we were doing earlier for the libraries, include IOStream. See how this gets no semicolon? These are going to be the majority of the times when you don't use semicolons. And as we go along, you'll see more of when you don't use semicolons and when you do. but for right now, no semicolons after any brackets, after parentheses, or after IOstream, or after the include statements. As you can see, I didn't list using namespace because we are going to want to put a semicolon after using namespace. So just keep that in mind. Okay, the next question I have is, how do you comment something within a program? So to comment, you're going to be using the backslash. It's 2 backslashes will comment out a single line. So you put single line comment. But to comment out multiple lines, you can either do multiple single line comments, or you can do a backslash with a star, and then a star and then a backslash. And then anything between these lines will be commented out. So none of this would have any effect on the code. And the way you can remember these is the star always goes on the inside, right? So you start with a bracket, then you put the star on the inside, and then you start with the star, and then you put the bracket on the outside. So to where if you didn't have any sort of comment, the star should touch. It should look like that. Okay? So the next question I have is, why do we use comments? So we use comments to document what we did. And so this can come in use if you're looking back on some old code and you're like, what did I do here? This doesn't make sense. And then now you have to figure out what you want to do just to fix it. It's also useful if somebody else is looking at your code. Like, let's say you're coming to me and you did some like really weird stuff with your code, and I'm just kind of like, I have to sit and figure it out before I can help you figure out what's wrong with it. If you just added a comment, like, so like, I'll be able to figure out what this does, but you like output the word hello. Now, I'll obviously be able to know see out hello, you know what I mean? But it's for when you get to more complicated stuff, specifically, is when you really want to use comments. Okay, and so the last thing I have is a little coding exercise. I'm going to try to have some of these at the end of each worksheet. And as always, I encourage you to try the worksheet beforehand, but I really encourage you to try to write the code before you see me do it. The more you code, the better you'll be at it. So this one's just going to be write an empty outline of a code. Essentially what I'm asking for here is to just write the basics of a program without actually having any code in it. And so that's just going to be mostly the things we listed earlier. So we're going to need our include IOstream. And so it's going to start with a hashtag, and then it's going to go include, and then it's going to have the less than sign, IOstream, and then the greater than sign. So it's going to be like, IOstream is going to be between the two carets. And then you're going to want to have, using namespace std. And remember, here we put a semicolon, but we don't put one here. Okay? And then next we have main, so start off with int, so int main, 2 parentheses, and then a bracket, and then put return 0, and remember semicolon here, and another closing bracket. And so this is just an empty outline of a code. It's got you everything you need to get started. It's got IOstream, namespace, and it's got main ready for you to type in. So if you start a new project in NetBeans, or if you go to online GDB, this is essentially what you'll either see, or you'll have to fix it to kind of look like this, depending on where you go. So this is where you always kind of want to start when you're writing code. And so now we can code whatever we want in here. And so just to reiterate, we can see I have 2 semicolons in here, one after using namespace std, and one after returning 0. We didn't put one after include because we're including a library, so that means no semicolon. And we didn't put one after here because it's ending on a parentheses. And we didn't put one after here because it's a bracket, or here. So yeah, remember you don't want semicolons here, here, or here, but you do want them for most other lines in your code. Alright, well, that's it for this worksheet. I will be making more worksheets and more videos, and hopefully have those uploaded soon. But if you have any questions, feel free to stop by my office hours, or just shoot me an email. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.
Thank you all for making it all the way through this video. Here's a little way of saying thank you.